Louise Dickson, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. For once, I actually remember where I met a guest who I asked to come on my radio show. I seem to forget where I hear about all my guests all the time. Well, now I haven't forgotten. I remember you very well from that Oneness Festival in Doylestown, PA that I decided to go to, and boy, I'm glad I went to that. It was finally nice to get out of the house for some sort of a conference, even if it was just for one day for a change. None of that was available throughout the year 2020 for reasons that not worth discussing, and you had very important information to give out, revolutionary information that could change society if people find out about this. So it's certainly worthy to have you on my show. And before I give you the chance to explain who you are and tell your life story for those who haven't heard about you, and then get into the important things about your technology to set the stage for anything else that we discuss in this interview, just a few quick little disclaimers for my listeners here. I have finally gotten around earlier this past week to posting interviews that I had done up to YouTube. I had about 6 pre-recorded interviews I hadn't uploaded to YouTube in a little over a month. I was trying to work around them trying to monetize my channel, but I still have a strike on my channel though for getting a video kicked off for exposing too much, and that's not going to be removed until mid-September. So I can't monetize ads until then. So I figured, okay, shouldn't wait until then. I guess I waited long enough. It's time for me to start uploading the videos, and hopefully nothing is going to be said in these videos that's going to get these video strikes or anything like that. It's a miracle I'm still on YouTube, but they will also be on Cost.tv, folks. Listen to Cost.tv, the short versions, if you can, because I can monetize on that channel through blockchain. The more people listen on Cost.tv, the more money I make. There is will be a link in the video descriptions, although I will charge people to pay me now on Patreon to listen to the entire interviews in their entirety. You'll see all my interview titles will have in parentheses at the end either short version or long version. The long versions, a full version I should say, will only be available for those who pay me on Patreon, subscribe on Patreon to listen to those in their entirety. It'll be the last 35 to 40% of the interview. So I've bagwelled long enough, Louise Dickson. It's time for you to set the stage for what you have to talk about. Tell who you are for those who haven't heard about you. And I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I don't interrupt my guests. So I'm going to shut up and put myself on mute and let you speak for as long as you want to get out the info that you need to give out, that you feel is worthy to give out on this very, very important subject that I feel people need to hear about.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be on your show today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get this information to more people who can benefit from it. Frequency therapy is brand new. It's just now becoming popular, even though it is basically a synergy of ancient wisdom which has been rediscovered. Because when we think about frequencies, cavemen in the ancient days who lived or stayed in caves, they understood echoes, and that makes a frequency. Chanting in the medieval ages, in the churches, the Gregorian chants were a form of frequency. And Negro spiritual music at night around a fire, which was often a cappella and many times in harmony, that creates a certain frequency. Drumming from Native American cultures, and then the Tibetan singing bowls, all of these types of ways of creating frequency have been used for centuries to create synergy, to create cohesion, to create a healing energy vibration. So it's definitely ancient wisdom that's being rediscovered. And when you think about some of the things that you've talked on to people on your show, and previously you've had various different topics about science and spirituality and how they need to cooperate rather than being antithetical. And artificial intelligence and metaphysics and homeopathy and the relationship between the material and the non-material worlds, all of this is becoming very popular for people to discover more in depth about these types of subjects. And science is basically just catching up, and there is renewed interest in quantum physics. So when we think about our modern medical model, it's really only very one-dimensional, because there are ancient healing methods that go back centuries, which include acupuncture from the Chinese traditions, and Thai massage, and Ayurvedic medicine from India, and then there's Ho'oponopono from the islands, and other things like Reiki or pranic healing. There's so many different types of healing modalities. So when we think about a modern medical model, it's really very one-dimensional. It's based on chemistry. And when you think about going to medical school to become a doctor, you spend hours and hours studying pharmacology and very, very little time studying nutrition or natural remedies. So when you think about the science that and the knowledge that developed from ancient time until now, homeopathy, believe it or not, was around in the mid 1700s. And I recently was visiting a Moravian settlement in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I discovered a whole complete homeopathic kit from 1758. And I've seen similar kits like that in Gettysburg in the museum. So we know that the early settlers in America used homeopathy, and soldiers in the Civil War used homeopathy as their go-to medical kit. That was very, very common. And it was Dr. Hahnemann from Germany who basically designed homeopathy. And that's based on frequencies, because his theory was that you take a minute amount of a certain substance and it will create a remedy for a problem that you have. So he would actually use things like, for example, poison ivy, just a minute amount, microscopic amount, could cure rashes. So that's how homeopathy has been using frequencies. And if you take a modern homeopathic kit today and look at what's inside of it, it's very, very similar to this kit that I have a picture of that I show people in my classes from the Moravian community. So most of science and scientific discoveries really grew very quickly, and there was a lot of discovery between the mid 1800s and the early 20th century. So from the mid 19th century, there's a lot of new science going on. For example, Nikola Tesla, that many of us have heard of, brilliant Serbian-American mechanical engineer who was very fascinated with electricity, which was just then being discovered. And he's most famous for designing the alternating current of modern electricity. And his vision was that, his understanding was that everything has a frequency. Every molecule, every atom, every rock, plant, animal, everything has a certain frequency. And when you go into the understanding of molecular science, if you look at the basis of an atom or a molecule, it looks, when you look at it in a textbook, it looks like the target symbol. There's a dot in the middle and then concentric circles around it. So it makes you think that there's like an atom and then there's electrons around it. But in reality, it's three-dimensional, and those circles represent a particle moving at very fast speed. So it looks like it's a circle. So we're talking about particles in motion. And it's kind of the same like a pinwheel. When you see a pinwheel, it's got 5 or 6 different petals. But if you blow on it really hard, it goes around so fast that it looks like it's a solid circle. So that's the understanding of the nature of atomic and molecular material. So particles are in motion. So that's what we call frequencies. That's why everything in existence has its own unique frequency based on how fast the particles are moving, how many different types of particles there are, if it's just hydrogen and oxygen, or if it's hydrogen and carbon and oxygen. Everything moves at a different frequency, and there's an infinite number of frequencies. So if you look at your human body, every human being also has certain frequencies, and every organ in the body, every meridian, every lymphatic system, everything has its own frequency. So understanding frequencies is becoming very, very popular. And Albert Einstein, one of the most, I would say, the most brilliant scientist in the world as we know it. Albert Einstein said, that the frequencies, modern medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. And when we think about scientists at that time who were alive at the time of Tesla and Einstein. There's a famous person by the name of Royal Rife. He was a scientist, an inventor, and a researcher, born in 1888, and by the early 20th century, he had created a machine which he said could create a certain frequency and a certain vibration to match a disease state or a bacteria. So he could identify a bacteria, he could discover what its frequency was, and he could match that frequency. So much like a singer who can sing at a certain pitch can shatter a wine glass, because the pitch of her voice is exactly the same frequency of that wine glass. It can shatter. His theory was, if he could introduce the exact right frequency into the body, he could shatter that bacteria or virus. And so he became very famous for this, and even to the point where he was making claims that he could cure cancer with his frequency machine. And you can look this up online. You can see videos on YouTube about Royal Rife and the types of research he was doing. However, his research was not appreciated by the current medical association. And if you understand also the other people who were alive at that time were people like Marie Curie and Alexander Fleming. And Marie Curie was discovering radium and polonium. And she is most famous for her contributions in curing cancer through radiation. And at the same time, Alexander Fleming, the Scottish biochemist, was researching penicillin, which was, the very first broad spectrum antibiotic. So what the medical association at the time decided was they were going to focus on the research of Marie Curie and Alexander Fleming, and that is the foundation of our modern medical system that we have today. So Royal Rife, unfortunately, his research was destroyed. His machines were shattered and broken. Anyone claiming to do frequency therapy was disbarred from the medical association. So it was a very rough time, and all of that research went completely dark. After 1930, no one had ever heard of frequency therapy. And so from the 30s to the 60s, that's when modern medicine really developed based on that chemical approach. Modern pharmaceuticals were developed, vaccinations were developed, and basically it was antibiotics, vaccinations, and radiation was the go-to methodology for modern medicine. And that's what we've been basically, that's what we've had for the last almost 100 years. And not to say that I'm an anti-pharmaceutical nut, but there are certain very good uses of pharmaceutical drugs, but they have also been misused. And antibiotics, in my opinion, have been overused to the point that we've created superbugs. But the vaccinations that we've had throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s have eliminated certain childhood diseases. There are diseases that existed in the first part of the 20th century, which really don't exist anymore, like polio or the mumps and some of these childhood diseases that have been eradicated through vaccinations. However, when I look at the numbers of vaccinations that children are required to have today compared to 20 or 30 years ago, it is very concerning to me. It feels to me that it's too much for a very young baby or a child to have that much artificial or vaccination material to be put into their body. So if we look at the 1950s, the resurgence and interest in the electrical nature of the body there was a resurgence in understanding how it is that electricity and water work inside a human body. And there were two people that particularly were interested in this research. One was Dr. Becker. He was an osteopath in New York. And another one was Dr. Nordenstrom, who was a radiologist in Norway. And between them, they came up with an understanding of the human body based on its electrical circuits. They came up with a theory that was known as the Becker-Nordenstrom theory, that the cell membrane tension of a cell the level of the tension on the cell between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell determine the health of the cell. So a young, healthy cell would have a fairly high cell membrane voltage, versus an aging or sick cell would have a lower cell membrane voltage. And that diminished cell membrane voltage is the origin of disease. The lower the voltage, the more you get things like aches, pains, inflammations, edema, blood loss, tumor cells, cell division, and at the very lowest, when there is no cell membrane voltage, that's when the cell dies. So their theory was encapsulated in a certain model, which actually won a prize from the Nobel Peace Prize. But they understood that your body is mostly water, and water and electricity coexist. Electrical impulses can be transmitted through water. And that's why we're told never to drop the hairdryer into a full bathtub. And every cell in your body depends on water for its existence. So if you think about the cell, the blueprint, the DNA of your cell is contained in every single cell. And each cell itself has the memory of approximately about 2 gigabytes. And each of your cells have intracellular water and intercellular water, which means they exist in a water environment and they have water inside of them. And the structure and functioning of each of your cells is largely the same, with a nucleus, a mitochondria for the energy, and ATP is the energy storage. So when I'm sure you remember all this from biology, but each of your cells has its own metabolism, its own vibration. And the cell metabolism, where water and nutrients are transported in and out of the cells through openings on this surface, which is the so-called cell membrane. And these valves in the cell membrane open and close as needed. And this mechanism is based on your voltage potential, which is the difference between the voltage between the interior and the exterior cellular space. So understanding the nature of our human body based on our electrical potential, what we understand is that there are many biological imbalances that could result with this cell membrane tension being not optimal. And the scientific research in recent decades has developed new interest in this theory to the point where there are now multiple types of devices that can help you optimize that cell membrane voltage by introducing microcurrents into the body. And a lot of these inventions are coming from Europe, particularly in Germany, where this new technology has been available to doctors and healers basically since the 1980s. You can go to Portugal. There are many, many clinics there which treat cancer naturally through frequency therapy. There is a detox center in Norway run by a Dr. Jan Fredrik Polizinski. He's been doing this for 20 years, where he uses frequencies to help people doing deep detoxification. This is called frequency-specific microtherapy, and it has been available in the last part of the 20th century and definitely a lot in the last 20 to 25 years. So if you go into alternative therapy clinics, like naturopaths, chiropractors, those types of people who are aware of frequency therapy, they may have a certain device, and there are many types of devices that they could be using. But one of the most sophisticated machines available today is produced by a German company by the name of TimeWaver. It's a large box that produces thousands and thousands of frequencies, and you control it through computer programs. Some of the early pioneers in this field, as I mentioned, Dr. Jan Fredrik Polizinski in Norway, Dr. Lisa Golder in Germany and Holland. She also practices in Tunisia, and she's been doing this for about 25 years. And Dr. Nuno Nina in Portugal, he's the one with the cancer clinics. And Dr. Carolyn McMakin, who was a chiropractor from Portland, Oregon. Her initial discovery so sorry about my phone. Her initial discovery of this modality was in the early 1980s when she set up a chiropractic office in Portland, Oregon, and discovered an old Rife machine in the back room of the clinic that she had purchased. So she was able to get an understanding of how to use it from handwritten notes by the retired osteopath who'd owned the clinic. And she went on to experiment and perfect her technique of using 2 different frequencies, specifically targeting first the body part and second the condition to be treated. So it could be a leg muscle that was cramped, or it could be, an internal body part like the liver that was maybe, fatty liver or disease, so that you could take 2 different frequencies, one for the body part and one for the condition to be treated. And she developed a technique which she now teaches all over the world. You can look up Carolyn McMakin online and you can watch her talk about her technique and her theories. She has her own website. She gives seminars in London and Germany and all over the world, different places where she teaches other chiropractors how to use frequency-specific microcurrent treatment in their practices. And she's also well known and recognized as the therapist who was able to get Terrell Owens back on the field in record time after a traumatic leg injury and major surgery. So he was basically doomed to sit out that season, but because of her work, she was able to get him in record time back into being able to successfully play in the Super Bowl in 2005. So this was when frequency therapy started to get, more and more attention here in the States. The other person that's really active with frequency therapy is Nuno Nina. He's a doctor in Portugal. His background and his life was focused on biochemistry, system engineering, mathematics, and homeopathy. And a lot of his books are now used as textbooks in major universities. But nowadays, he collaborates with several doctors in a medical support advisory capacity for the time waver frequency therapy machine. And his work in Europe and around the globe, because he's perfected and implemented innovative techniques in electromedicine and has developed a comprehensive system of frequency therapy with which he's supervised more than 42,000 patients in the last 15 years, including several presidents of countries and top athletes. So he understands that because we're all composed of atoms and molecules, which are arranged in positive and negative electrical charges, he's being able to establish that the correct way to use various voltages, currencies, current, impedance, resistance, etc., can, if it's done in the right way, can restore a bioenergetic balance to our body. So it allows our body to increase that cell membrane potential in each of the cells that you're addressing. And he's refined his techniques, and he's been able to set up clinics all over the world with a vision of bringing an alternative perspective on health to the population. And one of his famous clinics is the Akashic Clinic in London, which uses his techniques. So over the years, in cooperation with the Time Waver company, Nuno Nina developed what he called his unique time waver frequency system. It's called the Gold Frequency Collection. It's a database of 144,000 frequencies, which he can administer to patients depending on exactly what they need at the time that they need it. So it's clear and a comprehensive therapy protocol, and it can be reproduced for every user. And he's teaching this method of frequency therapy now, which focuses on the cellular level, and it's designed to produce lasting success. So there are probably almost 3,000 doctors throughout the world that are using frequency therapy. And in the past few years, if you look at the Google searches for frequency therapy, they've risen from about 600 a day to about over 1,000 searches per day. More and more people are starting to get interested in frequency therapy and how it works and how it can be applied. So just a little bit about the information field I'd like to talk to you about, because this is what current quantum physicists are really interested in. It's the non-material world, because science and physics up until now has been studying the material world. And they're realizing that there is in existence a non-material, invisible world that coincides with that. And the owner and an inventor of the time waiver systems, Marcus Schmicker, is the person that I want to talk to you a little bit about, because his whole life has been exploring the synthesis between science and philosophy. It's been his primary motive in life. You know, he studied physics and philosophy at university in Heidelberg and Hanover, and he became fascinated with this vision of exploring the interaction between matter and consciousness. And he also spent several years in India studying Vedic philosophy, and also several years in China studying acupuncture. So he has a very unique background with what he studied throughout his life. And he was influenced by Bernhard Heim, who was a German theoretical physicist as well. And his work influenced his own work. So through an intensive examination of Heim's model of the 12-dimensional structure of the universe, Marcus Schmicker then gained a deep understanding of what he calls the information field. And his understanding is that there is a physical world, so we have a physical body, and then we have connected to that physical body is the electromagnetic body. That's why we have meridians and acupuncture points that can be impacted. So you can heal the body at the molecular level, but also at the cell membrane potential level through the electromagnetic body. But that body is also connected through quantum processes to the non-material body. Excuse me while I try to move this around so I can see what I'm looking at. So the non-material body that he's talking about is kind of like a mirror image of your physical body, which exists in the non-material world. And he calls it the bioenergetic field of the body, which that's the local non-material image of your body. And then that is also connected to the global information field, which is what we call quantum entanglement. He says that microcurrent, scalar energy, and resonant frequencies can impact different aspects of the human being. And that's why he developed this time waiver machine, which can impact you at the molecular level through microcurrent, which is the application of certain wires and sticky pads which stick onto your body so that you can actually feel the microcurrent going into your body. So you've probably heard of a TENS machine, where those are fairly inexpensive, simple machines that produce microcurrent that you can feel. It feels like a tingling, and that can reduce muscle strain. It can help joint pain. Then there's scalar energy, which is based on the Tesla coil, which can impact your cell membrane potential level and your bioenergetic field. And then there's also resonant frequencies, which are kind of in the genre of like radio frequencies, which can impact you at the, quantum entanglement level. So having a machine that can not only analyze you through artificial intelligence, but also then deliver the exact frequencies that you need to optimize your health is what these time waiver machines do. So you can go to a therapist who's trained to use them, or you can actually now purchase a device that's affordable that you can use for home use, and complete manual. And this device will then analyze you not just at the chemical level, which we talked about earlier, our current medical model. You get a diagnosis, and then basically you're given a prescription, and you have a chemical solution to whatever your problem is. But that's very, very one-sided. When you look at the complete human body, you need to look at the cellular level, you need to look at the cell membrane voltage level, your frequencies, your physiological processes, your structure, whether you need detoxification, whether you're being impacted by electrosmog. You need to understand bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, and how that's also being impacted to your physical condition. And then look at the symptomatic level and the systemic level. But also you need to look at the psychic level, because many of us know that so many diseases have psychological causes, whether it's stress or whether it's hereditary issues or family family orientation issues, the spiritual level, and then also the informational level, which is the non-material. How are you being impacted by subtle forces or from geopathy or planetary influence? All of this can be diagnosed using a frequency therapy machine. So a person can be understood in his wholeness. When all these pieces are studied and analyzed, then you can aspire to reestablishing the right balance for optimal health. And then we call that bioenergetic balancing and optimization. So this is a little bit about how frequency therapy works, but it works on so many different levels. The US Food and Drug Administration, FDA, does not recognize medical applications of frequency therapy. So doctors that are using this are typically it's not going to be covered by insurance. It's known as non-medical applications, basically to harmonize your bioenergetic field. And the reason we have to use this kind of vague terminology is because it's still not accepted by the medical community as a medical solution. So that's why, we have to use very specific language which will be accepted by the FDA. So we can claim only that it can treat muscle strain or joint pain or muscle soreness due to overexertion, acute, chronic, and arthritic pain, and just for local relief of that kind of acute pain. But we can't claim any other things that it does. So that's why, we have to kind of fly under the radar of the Food and Drug Administration. We cannot make medical claims at all. So basically what we're talking about, microcurrent and frequencies, it's a low level current, it's barely noticeable, and it impacts your body to help your body reach homeostasis, and basically your body can then heal itself. So that's a little bit of the background, and if you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them, Andrew.
Oh, yes, I do indeed. I hear myself echoing in the background. Hopefully that'll go away. At this point, though, I guess since you got a lot of information out, might as well make this the point where the listeners will have to pay me to listen to the question and answer portion of this interview. But important thing is you got the soliloquy, the long soliloquy of great information out to begin with. So Patreon subscribers, that's where you're gonna have to do if you want to listen to this.